So Teddy Roosevelt had kind of hand selected his successor, William Taft. And then he left the United States for a year-long safari. He goes off to England and to Europe on a tour. And over the course of all that time, two things happen. First, he grows increasingly unhappy with the way that Taft is serving as president and increasingly critical of Taft. He also is in the midst of all of these political debates and discussions in Europe that make him excited for new policies that, if he were president again, he might be able to pursue. And so when he gets back to the United States, first of all, he is greeted with a hero's welcome. He is tremendously popular. And both that grievance with Taft and that excitement about these new ideas really begin to push him into thinking, well, maybe this would all be easier if I were just president again. And so that's what pushes him into running.
How did Americans react in 1912 to the idea of a former president running against a sitting president that he had helped tap for the job?
Oh, for some Americans, it struck them as disloyal, but other Americans, again, just loved Teddy Roosevelt. They liked having him as president. They thought he was an interesting and charismatic figure. And so he also drew a lot of support from Americans who wanted to see him back in the White House. And so that kind of split reaction is something that you're ultimately going to see play out in the campaign as the Republican Party splits between the two men. There's also kind of a third issue that came up when Roosevelt decided to run again, and that is, would he technically be breaking that two-term limit? He had gotten into office just a few months after becoming vice president when President McKinley was assassinated, so he'd served pretty close to two full terms. And so would this count as kind of breaking tradition and running for a third term? And so there were a handful of Americans who were a little concerned about that.
What had Teddy Roosevelt himself said about the two-term limit, or the what was set by George Washington, the precedent of George Washington stepping down after two terms?
Well, I think he kind of looked at it as a technicality that he'd only been elected to the presidency once in the 1904 election, and so he still had one campaign left in him. And also he felt, again, like compelled to serve. And so I think to the extent that there were any misgivings about running for a third term, he felt uniquely appointed to be the person that broke that streak, because he felt, again, like almost a moral mission to serve again.